It's also a confirmation of what the church has proclaimed for millennia, that we are not made to be alone, but we are made for covenant.
Sociologist Dr. Brad Wilcox speaking at this year's Issues Etc. Making the Case conference.
So give today's young men and women the truth that they deserve. Pursue marriage, pursue it with intention, and pursue it in your 20s, when the window is widest and the possibilities most open. The road ahead, of course, is not easy, but it leads somewhere worth going, and you, 20-somethings here, were made for this journey.
You can watch and listen to Dr. Brad Wilcox making the case for 20-something marriage from the 2026 Making the Case conference. For a $250 gift by Labor Day, we'll send you a link to video and audio recordings of the entire conference. Learn more at issuesetc.org.
I think the fate of Christianity in Europe should be very, very sobering for Christians in America and make them realize that nothing can be taken for granted at this point.
What you actually can affirm for your child is you are baptized. You don't need to be defined by this gender dysphoria that's nagging at you and trying to get you to carve up your body and make all these changes. You are actually defined by what God says.
Union with the flesh of Jesus. There is nothing greater than that. And American evangelicalism cannot say that. It's a disembodied Christ. There's no Jesus in the water, Jesus in the Word, Jesus in your ear, Jesus in your mouth.
All of the Lutherans from the very beginning to the very end teach not only that good works are to be done, but even the necessity of good works.
Grocery clerks in Tennessee love listening to Issues Etc.
It's undeniable, and yet there are many who are still either officially or unofficially denying it or ignoring the fact that a population bust is coming for the U.S. for many countries, and in the U.S., then probably for all the states together, even for the ones that are bucking the trend right now. What would that mean for us, for our society, and how soon is it coming? Greetings and welcome to Issues Etc. I'm Todd Wilkin. Thanks for tuning us in live this Tuesday afternoon, the 11th of August. Dr. Lyman Stone joins us to talk about the coming population bust. Dr. Kirk Clayton will be alongside for part 2 of our series with him on the reliability of the Bible. And then we'll be looking forward to Sunday morning, according to the one-year lectionary, the 11th Sunday after Trinity with Dr. John Bombaro. Dr. Lyman Stone is Director of Research for Demographic Intelligence. He's Senior Fellow and Director of the Pronatalism Initiative at the Institute for Family Studies, and he's author of a recent op-ed for the New York Times titled "The Population Bust is Coming Sooner Than Anyone is Prepared For." Lyman, welcome back.
It's great to be with you.
Why does the size and the growth of the U.S. population matter?
You know, there's a lot of ways we could think about that. The one I always think about is if you get my whole extended family together, there's a pretty good number of us. And if somebody came along and said, you know, it'd be great if there were fewer of you, I'd be a little insulted. I think most of us understand that there's actually just something intrinsically good about seeing, you know, the big family reunion, seeing how your family has grown. But nations are just gigantic amalgamations of kind of families. We can call it fictive kinship is the technical term, but the point is, I think it's great for the U.S. to grow because population growth is part of what makes us a large, strong nation. It's part of what makes us prosperous, that we can have so many domestic industries doing so many different things instead of being dependent on just one or two. And beyond that, of course, that we do have a biblical mandate to go forth and multiply, and it's not abrogated. And so I think that there are a lot of reasons we could care about our population growth.
Tell us about the U.S. population prediction that was made by a Harvard professor in 1775.
So on the eve of the Revolution, this guy with a really fantastic, a name of name quality we could all aspire to, his name's Edward Wigglesworth. He sits down with some numbers on U.S. population growth, population of the British colonies from the 1600s up to 1775. And he says, wow, we're increasing really rapidly. We're having a huge increase in population. And he says, okay, well, if that continues into the future, what will happen? And so he projects, so to speak, that there will be 1.2 billion Americans in the year 2000. He was not quite correct. There were less than 300 million in the year 2000, or just about 300 million. The more interesting thing is how he talked about this. He has this whole he waxes eloquent talking about how, oh, you can imagine their farms spanning the continent and all these diverse various products they'll be produced. Like, this was just so exciting to him. It was a vision of American greatness. And he ends up saying this because he wants to convince British people not to alienate America. He's saying, look, you want to keep us on your side because there's going to be so many of us producing so many things. It'd be a shame to lose us. Of course, the revolution starts the next year. But in terms of population, it's very interesting to have that population projection right there at the dawn of our country.
Why didn't that prediction prove true?
So until 1900, it did actually prove true. We actually stayed pretty much on, almost exactly on Wigglesworth's trend line, so to speak, until about 1900, just before 1900. Then we see a decline. It's not because immigration declined. Actually, immigration rates were higher in the 19th century than Wigglesworth anticipated. He talks about this a little bit, and higher than they'd been during his life. It's because fertility fell. And by the later 19th century and early 20th century, fertility decline had accelerated enough that American population was starting to chronically underperform our growth trajectory from 1600 until 1880 or 1890. And we've continued to underperform ever since.
When do most experts or governmental agencies predict a decline in the U.S. population?
So there's lots of different groups that produce population forecasts, and it's their job to, put numbers on this. Most of them, the Census Bureau says that the U.S. will enter population decline in the 2070s or 2080s. The United Nations says it won't be until after 2100. The Social Security Trust Fund also says it won't be until after 2100. So most of these public forecasting bodies have this very optimistic picture that the U.S. is going to continue to grow for many decades to come, certainly throughout much of the remainder of my life. Well, this is not likely to actually happen. This is exceedingly unlikely to be correct.
So when do you think the decline is more likely to begin?
It's likely that the U.S. will see peak population before 2070, perhaps as soon as 2050. So very much, hopefully, if the Lord should bless me with it, hopefully within my lifespan. Not that I hope I see peak America, but it does seem likely that between 2050 and 2070, we will see the end of American growth and the beginning of permanent American decline.
So why is that population bust coming sooner than many expect?
There are a lot of different things that go into these population forecasts, but there's really two specific pieces of wishful thinking that underpin these hopeful population predictions. They're related to immigration and fertility. The first one, immigration, pretty much all these forecasts just assume we're going to get 1 million immigrants a year net forever. That is not plausible. First of all, President Trump is not going to be the last president to restrict immigration. There may be some that have much higher rates, but there will certainly be many that have much lower. And in the long run, fertility decline is happening all around the world. The U.S. is not the only country with a falling birth rate. And so we're actually approaching the time when we will be past the peak of global young adult populations, at least outside of Africa. That day is very swiftly coming. We're actually already past peak baby. Like the peak number of humans born in a year was, I want to say it was back in 2013 or something. So we're soon approaching peak young adult, and the young adult years are when most migration happens, as you can see from any news broadcast you've ever seen of any kind of large migration, whether it's the recent stuff in Spain or the US southern border or anywhere else. So once we're through this peak young adult period, global migration rates will decline. At the same time, more and more countries will be short of young people, and they will be trying to recruit the fewer and fewer available migrants. As a result, we can expect that by the 2050s, 60s, 70s, the US will actually be facing genuine difficulty in recruiting migrants. We will have the opposite problem we have today. Instead of debating how can we contain the flow of immigrants and illegal versus legal and all that, instead, by the 2060s, we'll likely be saying things like, what can we do to recruit more immigrants? How can we make ourselves more appealing to the shrinking number of possible migrants? And I don't say that as a political commentary one way or another, just the math is such that if old people don't want to die very miserable lives, die very miserable deaths at the end of their days, they'll need a lot of help. And it's unlikely to be from descendants because a growing share of them will be childless. And so we will be very actively looking for immigrants in about 30 or 40 years.
Are any of the states in the U.S. bucking the trend in any way?
Yeah, there are some. So South Dakota still has about replacement rate fertility that's driven by Native Americans in part, also Hutterite minorities. That's an Anabaptist sect that has some settlements in South Dakota, but also there's just a lot of farm communities. My own home state of Kentucky has had one of the smallest declines in fertility. It has still declined, but it's been relatively stable, basically because we've just been building lots and lots of housing, keeping house prices, I won't say cheap, but relatively manageable compared to local incomes. And then also there's some stuff going on in Appalachia there. But for the most part, no. The vast majority of places are declining or will soon see these falling fertility rates and associated population declines. Globally, there are a few countries that are kind of holding out. You can think about a place like Israel or to some extent Mongolia or Vietnam actually is a case where fertility is declining, but much slower than in most surrounding areas. And there are some things we can learn from those countries, but they also tend to be sort of unique cases that may be hard to generalize from.
So is there any evidence to support the hopeful ideas that many hold of higher immigration and rising fertility rates?
No. I mean, I would love to say, yeah, it's all going to be great. But actually, the only way that we would arrive at those is by significant changes in current trajectory, right? You need to have the country, both parties, really commit to supporting higher immigration in the long run, or commit to supporting family formation and higher birth rates and doing a lot of policy changes for that. And while I would love to say that that's about to happen, I mean, my job at the Institute for Family Studies is in some sense to make that happen on the fertility rate side, not so much the immigration side, but the fertility side. But also I think it's just important to be realistic and say that those policies are not, it's not like Congress is just itching to pass laws to help families, quite the opposite. In fact, family interests are definitely low priority for Congress. And I would say, in fact, if anything, declining in priority as fertility falls. Lots of politicians like to talk about this, but at the end of the day, there just aren't that many young people to vote because prior generations had fewer babies, and so the younger cohorts are smaller, whereas older voters are a very large block. I mean, it's the same reason that the new blockbusters are all just rehashes of old movies.
Dr. Lyman Stone is our guest. We're talking about the U.S. population bust. When we return, what is the likely population picture for the next several decades in the U.S.?
We're going to have to be vigilant on two different fronts. We're going to have to defend the truth about the human person, made in the image and likeness of God, created male and female, created for marriage. We're also going to have to defend our freedom to live according to those truths.
Dr. Ryan Anderson, president of the Ethics and Public Policy Center and member of the White House Religious Liberty Commission, speaking at this year's Issues Etc. Making the Case conference.
Over and over again, we're going to see that we have to form the next generation of our students, of our children, our grandchildren to believe the truth, while also defending our freedom to live it out. And then the long game is reforming our civil laws to reflect the truth.
You can watch Ryan Anderson's presentation, Making the Case for Social Conservatism, from the 2026 Issues Etc. Making the Case conference. For a donation of $250 by Labor Day, we'll send you a link to watch an on-demand video stream and download audio recordings. Order online at issuesetc.org.
Your comprehensive source for information, teaching, and truth. You're listening to Issues Etc.
The church's music from the 2nd century.
Shepherd of tender youth, guiding in love and truth.
The 6th century. The 12th century. The 16th century. The 21st century. The best of the church's music from the past 2,000 years. LutheranPublicRadio.org.
The Ephatha Lutheran Mission Society hosted a one-day sign language camp last week at Concordia Theological Seminary. 26 children from local Lutheran congregations attended and learned Bible stories, hymns, and parts of the divine service, including the Lord's Prayer, in American Sign Language. To find out more about the Ephatha Lutheran Mission Society, visit elms-deaf.org, elms-deaf.org. We're talking with demographer Lyman Stone about his op-ed in the New York Times, "The Population Bust is Coming Sooner Than Anyone is Prepared For." Lyman, what then is the likely population picture for the next several decades in the U.S.?
We'll see continuing slow growth for some time. There will be episodes of migration, I'm sure, where we see faster growth briefly, but it won't stick. And then by the 2050s and 60s, we will enter into decline, and that decline won't be even. As population declines, what will happen is not that people sort of spread out and go to affordable places, because population decline tends to be very concentrated. Entire towns will vanish. Entire counties will sort of fold up shop. The result will be that young people will flee even more than they already are to big cities, because those are places where there will be jobs, there will be other young people to meet and marry. And so even as we have population decline, the few remaining big cities will become ever more expensive. And you can already see this process happening in the US, but you can really see it in places like Eastern Europe, where, Bulgaria is declining, but Sofia is really nice. Estonia is declining, but Tallinn is really nice. You can see this in East Germany, the eastern part of Germany, where it's collapsing population-wise, but Berlin is really vibrant. So we can expect to see that rural areas will experience genuine implosion and collapse of social services. It'll be impossible to support public schools in much of the country, at least in their current mode. And it will also be largely impossible to take care of old people in much of the country. And I don't expect Congress will really do anything about this. Much of the burden will fall on state and local governments, and Congress will be desperately trying to keep Social Security and Medicare solvent. And so I don't think that we should just say, oh, well, somebody will solve it. Probably no one will solve it, and so we will have a very difficult few decades.
By way of a remedy, if you had kind of the wish list, what needs to happen to avoid the population bust?
So the op-ed that I wrote for the New York Times was based on a larger report we wrote. It's our inaugural State of Fertility report at the Institute for Family Studies. And at the end of it, we do have a bunch of policy suggestions, and we also have a bunch of evidence. When I say policy suggestions, I don't just mean for government. We did a big survey where we asked people about non-governmental influences on fertility and the celebrities they follow, their friends' attitudes, how their friends would respond if they had kids. And the result we came away with was that these things really matter a lot. So while we do have some policy proposals, there's a big investment plan we suggest that would create a permanently financially solvent benefit to support family life and support marriage that I think is worth looking at. Beyond that, we found that, we all know that religious people have more kids. But we found that the effect of religion was dwarfed by the effect of just thinking that your friends will celebrate it if you have a baby. That young people were way more likely to have kids if they think that their peers will think well of that than they are if they are religious. Okay, so the effect of religion was much smaller than the effect of just having pro-baby friends. So I think that a takeaway from that is we need to be thinking about how to transform ourselves into pro-baby friends. Like, how do we present ourselves to the young people in our lives as the people who are going to help them, support them, encourage them, and celebrate if they have kids? Or are we going to be the naysayers who, if they got pregnant, we'd say, oh, well, was this really the right timing? Aren't you worried about your health? Isn't this going to disrupt your work? Oh, won't this mess up your school plans? Instead, we should be cheerleaders. And that genuinely makes a difference. That it actually makes a very large difference in the family size people want and the number of children they intend and if they're actually trying.
We're both members of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. How do you think our church body as a whole should prepare for the population bust?
So I think at a congregational level, there's just a recognition that has to happen that once the baby boomer generation has gone to sleep in Christ, there will be a big decline in our overall numbers. After that happens, there will actually be some relative stability. There will still be some decline, but we'll kind of be through the worst of it because our younger cohorts are a little more evenly sized. But even so, the number of clergy that we can financially support is going to be very constrained in terms of full-time clergy trained in a residential model. How we tackle that is an open question. Maybe we will all just dig deeper and tithe harder. I think that sounds like a great solution. I'd love for that to happen, but I'm also a realist, and I think that may happen in some places, but it probably won't happen everywhere. So we'll need to be thinking about how do we train our lay people to do the LSB settings that are designed to have an L on them instead of a P, right? We don't exactly just want to be, we obviously have settings they can't do, things they can't do, but we need to be thinking about how to train our lay people to do what they can do and how to train our pastors for the multi-site responsibilities they're going to be having in the future, because it's likely that a growing share of our pastors will be doing the exact thing that they were doing 100 years ago. That is supervising multiple churches. That was the norm for a very long time. It's likely to be the norm again. And it's likely we'll all look back at this period where every church had their own pastor all the time as a sort of unusual moment. So I think that those are going to be things that we're definitely going to have to prepare for.
Dr. Lyman Stone is Director of Research for Demographic Intelligence. He's a Senior Fellow and Director of the Pronatalism Initiative at the Institute for Family Studies, author of a recent op-ed for the New York Times, The Population Bust is Coming Sooner Than Anyone is Prepared For. You'll find a link to it and to the Institute for Family Studies on the podcast page for this episode at issuesetc.org. Lyman, thanks.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Dr. Kirk Clayton joins us on the other side for part 2 of our series on the reliability of the Bible. What's the difference between guilt and shame? And where can we find freedom from our shame? The Issues Etc. Book of the Month for August is From Shame to Glory, Surprising Remedy for Injustice and Failure. It's written by regular guest Dr. John Kleinig. From Shame to Glory is published by Concordia Publishing House. Their phone number 1-800-325-3040, or browse before you buy at issuesetc.org. From Shame to Glory, Surprising Remedy for Injustice and Failure. The Issues Etc. Book of the Month.
Psalm 144:1. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Those serving in the armed forces want LCMS chaplains. We need courageous pastors to bring the gospel and sacraments to those protecting our nation, along with wise counsel and the peace found only in Christ Jesus. If you are between the age of 26 and 43 and have a heart for ministry in the armed forces, call 314-996-1337 or email lcmschaps@lcms.org.
Lutheranism in the public square. You're listening to Issues Etc.
Birds sing, cows moo, thunderstorms wake you from a deep sleep, but for many, they can't hear it. They're deaf, living in a world of total silence. The Epitha Lutheran Mission Society for Deaf Ministry is the only recognized service organization in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod devoted exclusively to the deaf and hard of hearing. Their mission is to bring the gospel message of Jesus' love and saving grace to those who are deaf. Learn more at elms-deaf.org.
The Lutheran Church Missouri Synod's Life Ministry cares for pregnant women sharing the love of Christ. Listen to Pastor Ed DeWitt with Redeeming Life Outreach Ministries.
One of the first residents we had said to me, "Pastor, why do you do this?" And I said, "Just stick with me through this class, and when we're done, you'll understand completely." Many of the women, as they go through the instruction, when we get to that part about baptism, they're like, "Pastor, I want that for my baby. I want my baby to be adopted into God's family."
God's Mission Here, lcms.org/national mission.